Welcome in, boys and girls. I'm Jaeger, and today gonna take the 9 axes political quiz. Just as kind of a clarifier note, I am on call for work, so if I get called to end the stream, just delete it and I'll restream something similar later. But first things first, time to get a copyright hit from YouTube by playing a little bit of a song. That's kind of the running joke on the program. That's Adrian Makes It Rain by Everybody Dies in Utah. It's a great song. Check out their YouTube channel. And that's just to get the copyright strike gone and out of the way. But this is the 9 axes political quiz. So its categories are progress, tradition, secular, religious, equality, markets, federal, unitary, assimilationist, multiculturalist, militarist, pacifist, democracy, authority, globalist, isolationist, security, freedom. And then it goes into these categories. So we're just going to go ahead and take the quiz. I may have taken it before. I do not remember taking it, but I might have. So we're going to do the full version, 216 questions. A constant state of war benefits a country. Well, it really kind of just depends on what the war is about. So I'll say I'll generally agree, just because it really just depends. Because if there's nobody to fight, then of course you don't have war. But in the world now, today, it does benefit the country to protect its sovereignty and to help others out humanitarianly around the world. A national government can't understand what people need. See, this is another one. It kind of depends. So, if it's a democracy, well, the people can vote for what they need. If it's a dictatorship, then it doesn't really matter what the people need, whether it's a national government. So it depends on the type of government. I guess I did take it before. I might have just taken the short one. But yeah, I just saw somebody else take it. Was bored today and like, well, might as well take it and just run through all the questions, all the different answers. So I'm going to say neutral on this one because it depends on the government. Like I said, if it's a democracy, then I'd probably agree, unless it's a kleptocracy or a guise of democracy. If it was a dictatorship, I'd definitely disagree. It is important to maintain our national sovereignty. Yeah, I agree about that one. People born to wealthy families have an unfair success. even when they aren't skilled and don't work hard. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they have an unfair, but I don't think that we should do anything about that being unfair. It's just the way things are in life. Life isn't fair. And the quicker you get used to it, the quicker you can make something of your life. So, yeah, I agree. Diplomacy only hurts nations. And so that one could go either way. I can agree or disagree. It depends on the type of diplomacy. So I'm going to go neutral. My dog was just starting to howl. Of course. So the government has no business looking into most people's personal lives. I'd say generally I agree. They have no business, but if you're plotting an act of terror, that is where it kind of draws the line. It's a fuzzy line, which is one of the tough parts with some of these questions is like, well, it's situational. But I'll say generally, I'll agree. Countries that do not serve our interests should be toppled. Once again, like this could go so many different ways because there are countries out there that generally don't serve our interests, but they don't really pose a threat at all, and so there's no reason they should be toppled. But countries that pose a threat that do not have our interest in mind should be toppled. So probably neutral there. There should be no police force. I strongly disagree. We need somebody to enforce the laws, or it's going to turn into Mexico, where whoever has the biggest gun or the biggest group of friends with guns will be the new police force. In general, immigrants are bad for the country. I am going to disagree. It is limited on the amount of immigrants that you can have because there's only a certain amount of space, land area, housing. So, but I'll say generally they are a net positive for what they do and what they bring. There are some issues with immigrants coming in, especially in lower income areas where they take the work of the lower class citizens in some areas. But as far as when they're coming here for agriculture where nobody actually wants to do that work, I think they are a very net positive. There aren't many people in America that are going to live in a trailer drawn by horses the entire summer herding sheep. There's just not people that are willing to do that. But immigrants that come over from Peru or Argentina are willing to do that. So I'm going to disagree on this one. State and local laws should have precedence over national laws. That's one, again, that kind of depends. So, but I would say in general, the national laws should have precedence over the state laws, but the state should hit the national law at a minimum and at least go over or under it. So I am going to disagree. So we'll just go through chat. Big ups to the immigrants by Dr. Zaus. And Richard's here. We mentioned earlier that we actually took this quiz before, but I don't remember taking it. So there is no higher power. So is this talking religion? Is this talking the New World Order? Is this talking the deep state? Because like right now, the government, they're a higher power than what I am in the private sector. So I don't know really what this means, whether it's religion or whether it's deep state or whether it's just in general the government. So I'm going to go neutral. So democracy makes it too easy for a majority to further itself at the expense of minorities. Well, generally speaking, that's how democracy works. But there are things where they set certain laws and certain procedures in place to benefit the minorities. But in democracies, you are at the will of the majority. So, yeah, democracies make it too easy for it, but really that's the way they're designed. So I'm going to agree. People must be allowed to follow a religion. Sure. I mean, if people want to follow a religion, that's their choice. They can follow a religion if they want to. I mean, I don't know what's like if it's a national religion, I'd probably disagree. But if it's just follow a religion in general, yeah, they should be allowed to. You shouldn't restrict people from doing what they want to do as far as that aspect, as long as they don't hurt other people. We should put effort on getting a person to Mars in the near future. So I'm actually going to disagree on this one. Like, what benefit does us to have somebody on Mars? Unless we believe that we can inhabit Mars in the future, it does us no benefit to go there. I would rather have like a space defense system than putting somebody on Mars. So I'll disagree. Because if a country like Russia wants to put somebody on Mars or China wants to put somebody on Mars, go right for it. Like the space race to there. Like I just don't see this as like an important thing in society is putting somebody on Mars unless science comes out and says we can have potentially Mars and we can start to cultivate it and make it have life again. But yeah, I don't think we should put effort putting somebody on Mars. Now, if there's an alien race with alien technology, it might be a good thing. But yeah, I agree with Richard here. You know, leave Mars to the private sector. Elon Musk can go to Mars. Okay, religion does not belong in the government. I will agree there. Peace is preferable to war whenever possible. I will disagree on the last two words. Whenever possible. Because sometimes it isn't possible. And sometimes people will use the guise of peace, like Hitler was trying to do in World War II and Hayes negotiated with Chamberlain. Like they'll use that. There's some times where you got to stand up for yourself and you got to take action. So I will disagree. Anybody who wants to enter the country should be able to. That I will disagree with. On the aspect, there's the Taliban, there's Al Qaeda, there's militant groups out there, there's Russians that generally don't like Americans. So it shouldn't be anybody, but there should be a process and people should be able to enter, especially if they're going to come for tourism. They're going to come here peacefully. They're not going to try to bypass the immigration system. But yeah, just anybody who wants to enter, I will disagree. Subdivisions of nations should have their own military. So I'm not sure what it means by subdivisions of nations. Like, would that just be like everybody in Europe should have their own military, everybody in Africa? Because that I would agree with. But if you're saying, well, like for Mexico, where we're going to have militia here that's run by one cartel militia there. So I don't know what subdivisions of nations mean, but I'm going to just go neutral because I don't understand the question. So Richard says, did Kyle Kalinske write that question? LOL, war bad, always. Well, that's his stick. And he doesn't understand much of any conflict. It's just a stick that if it's war bad, but it's only war bad if the U.S. does it. Like he has a video where Russia going into Crimea where he wasn't going to do anything about it. He just wanted to talk to him and find out why. When it's obviously why Russia went into Crimea is because it needed a warm water port. But it's neither here or there. So, but I don't understand this question, so I'm going to put neutral. So equality of outcome is important. See, I will strongly disagree on this one. It should be equality of opportunity, because you start doing equality of outcome, then people who work hard will be put on the same level as people that don't work as hard. In the modern era, militaries are not really necessary. They are probably necessary more now than ever. The United States having the military it does prevents a lot of wars, because people do not want to go against the United States, which is why there's more proxy wars than outright wars. So yeah, this is definitely strong disagree. Nobody in other countries has our best interest in mind. Well, really, the people in other countries should have their country's best interest in mind, not necessarily the American interest in mind. It should be the best interest for their country. They're looking, well, is this move going to infuriate America? They're not doing what's best for their country. Now, as far as like foreign policy and acts of war and stuff like that, that's where, they'd go against American interests. But saying nobody in other countries has our best interest in mind, I will agree with that one. The United Nations needs more power. See, this one sucks, because I would normally say agree. They need more power if the United Nations was what it set out to be. But right now, it's just kind of a mess. So right now, it's kind of an anti-American, anti-Israel. Like, other people can get away with different things every time they try to come to a resolution against some act that some other country, China and Russia, vetoed the act. So really giving them more power is just going to create kind of a lame duck agency. So I'm going to disagree. Local governments address issues that the national government would never touch without them. So I do think that's true, but this goes into kind of the libertarian philosophy where, like, oh, well, the local government can handle everything and the federal government's essentially useless, which is incorrect. Like, the federal government provides a lot of funding to states that the local government cannot raise. So local governments do address some certain issues that the national government would never touch without them. That is true. That is a true statement, but it doesn't show the whole picture. So I'll agree with that statement. No cultures are superior to others. It depends on what this means as far as a superior, because there are some cultures that are more superior to others. Like, if you take Afghanistan, for instance, Afghanistan's been at war since the 70s, so about 50 years of war. Their culture there is kind of a fighting culture. You take Switzerland, which is, other than World War II, a couple bumps there, but they're really neutral. Their culture really hasn't been in any wars. They've just been kind of a banking culture. And they've made a lot of money versus the poverty rate in Afghanistan. So the culture in Switzerland is better than the culture in Afghanistan. So there are some. Not everybody's equal. Everybody has equal human rights, but each culture is not equal as far as superiority. So I will disagree. The general populace makes poor decisions. Yeah, that's probably true. Because we're people. We can't always make the best decisions. But there are occasions where we'll make poor decisions. Now, if this is just an American question, yeah, there's a bunch of poor decisions that the general populace makes in America. Diet's probably one of the primary ones that are poor decisions. As far as the health effects for having a poor diet, not getting enough exercise is a poor decision. So Dr. Zhao says, do they put different questions in every time? I just did it and I get the same question. So there's two different quizzes. You can take the 45 question. This is the full one. This is the full 216 question quiz. So, yeah, but as far as the general populace making poor decisions, I would agree. But the consequences of And then Richard brings up another point too about the average debt per citizen is about 15K. And yeah, debt was another one. Like, not a great decision to go into debt. I know Kevin's way against debt. I'm not as against. I think your house is a good investment. Like, if you get a house, that's a good investment. Like, you shouldn't wait until you have enough cash to buy a house, because a lot of times your house can gain value. It'd be better to get in the house and then start making modifications. And then if you need to, sell the house, move into something smaller or move into something bigger. Like, a house is a really good investment that you can make. So I will agree that the general populace makes poor decisions, but they also make some good decisions as well. But generally speaking, yeah, poor decisions. Maintaining family values is essential. So I think it's a great thing to maintain family values, but I don't think it's essential. Like, I don't think like your standard get married, have a couple of kids is essential in today's society. Like, it's one of those things that's definitely the preferred way to go. But I mean, if you're single your whole life, you save up money and can retire, that's not a bad life either. Or if you get married and you don't have kids your entire life, like one of my buddies, he's going to retire early. He doesn't have to pay for kids going to school, doesn't have to pay for the school clothes, doesn't have to pay anything along that way. He just has his dogs, and him and his wife just have those dogs. They both work. But yeah, he's probably going to retire at 50. And so then you'll have the next 40 years of his life to do whatever you can. So I will disagree. I don't think it's essential. It's definitely preferred for most people, but not essential. No authority should be left unquestioned. Yeah, I mean, you can question authority, as far as like information, like some secret information, like, releasing everything the CIA has done. So yeah, just to address Richard, yeah, he does the 401k, he does the IRAs. But yeah, as far as like retiring early and as far as like his family situation, I mean, kids are a huge investment. Like, there's a lot of money spent on kids. I know you can, just get them up, even if they just go to high school and take out student loans to go to college or join the military. But those 18 years of raising them, you have the food, you have the clothes, you have the toys, you have all the time you have to spend with them. There is a huge investment that goes with children. And, they're definitely, like everybody that's had them said, they're definitely a good thing. But you can exist and have a great life in society without them. So back to this question. So no authority should be left unquestioned. I'll generally agree, but there's some information that should be classified. War is never justified. Yeah, strongly disagree on that one. There are many justifiable cases of war. There are justifiable cases where we didn't actually go to war. Yeah, so just to kind of highlight Richard's comment here. So got to push trades and apprenticeships on the future to lower the debt too. So one of the issues with trades is eventually, like, you'll use trades, but eventually your body's going to wear out and you're going to have to get out of them. Like, if you're a welder, you may make $40 an hour and you may make six figures a year, but eventually you're going to have to get your knee replaced. Eventually you may have to get back surgery. So like some of those trades, like, they got to be a means to a different job if you don't want to have surgery for the rest of your life. Or you got to take care of yourself, diet, exercise, and those things, ergonomics, because you want to avoid the soft tissue injuries with trade. Apprenticeships are nice. That should, get you into there. And they are good things. Like, they're underperformed, and a lot of people don't want to go to school forever. And it is a good way to reduce debt as well. But you just got to look at it from the long game too, because there are a lot of soft tissue injuries in the trades. So the government should not fund any religious organizations in any way. I agree. So I don't see a reason why the government should. It should just be funded by the individual people going to that religion. Marijuana should be legalized. I agree. Lasting peace leads to prosperity. So that is true. Like, peace can lead to prosperity, but getting that peace. The world has pretty much always been at war. Go back to the Native American tribes and their wars against each other. You could even go back to Mesopotamia. You know, you have the Spartans back in Greece and the Persians. Like, there is always been war. There's never been a period of lasting peace. But if there was, and it was utopia, yeah, it could lead to prosperity. United Nations should have a military to enforce its resolutions. That one's interesting. So I don't actually agree with this one, because the United Nations should just be an apolitical kind of organization that gives people the opportunity to talk, provides humanitarian aid, and then makes decisions on different things. But if the United Nations had a military, like, how would they go in? How would they enforce it? They would generally take sides. There would be issues with that. So I'm going to disagree on the United Nations having a military. It is important that we maintain the traditions of our past. Not really. Like, traditions are kind of silly, but it's also important that we remember the past so we don't repeat it. So I'm going to slightly disagree on this one. I support single-payer universal health care. So the public option that Joe Biden's proposing is a form of single-payer health care, and it would be a universal health care. But it isn't Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all. So that's what it, single-payer universal, yeah, I'd support the public option, but I wouldn't support Medicare for all. So I will slightly agree here. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others we've tried. I don't know what that really says. Democracy is the best shit sandwich, and we all have to take a bite, because all the others are shit sandwich without any flavor. So I'd say democracy is generally a good form of government, and it's the best one that we've had. So, yeah, it's better than all the other governments that we've tried. Even though the United States isn't a democracy, it's a representative republic. So, probably just neutral on this one. Immigrants are net positive. We kind of went over this a little bit earlier. Immigrants are a positive to the nation. The issue is there's only a certain amount. Like, you just can't open the borders and have 2 billion people come to the United States. So there is a number there. But for the immigrants that come over and especially work in the agriculture industry, they are a super net positive. Now, the ones that go in the inner city start taking jobs from normal residents, there is something there that we have to look at, and we have to find ways to improve our inner cities of the United States. So, but yes, they are a net positive. Illegal immigrants should be deported in most or all cases. This goes back to how much we want to focus on immigration. And, if they're illegal immigrants, they should be deported in most all cases. Well, if somebody overstayed their visa, and we could just help them with the renewal process rather than spending the money to send them back to Southeast Asia, for instance. Like if we could just help them renew the visa, that would be fine. Like people that just cross the border illegally, you know, deporting them to Mexico is probably not a bad idea. But this is like a tough question because most or all cases. So as far as the immigration numbers, I'm not sure. Like inside the issue of illegal immigration, is it mostly overstayed visas, or is it people crossing the border getting caught and having to be sent back? So I'm not really sure on this one because I don't know what most or all the cases are of illegal immigration. Because depending on what most of the cases are, if most of them are overstayed visas, then I would disagree. But if most of them are illegal border crossings, then I'd probably agree. Faith is complete nonsense. So, like theocratic faith, I would agree. But faith in like the government or the faith in the United States military, I would disagree. But I think this is going from the theocracy point of view. So I will agree. The hierarchical state is the best. I'm not sure what that means. So, like, would that be like a monarchy? Or would that be something like else? But I'm not sure what hierarchical state is. So I'm going to be neutral on that one. Government should be as concerned about foreign citizens as they are about those within their borders. It depends on what the foreign citizens are trying to do. Like if somebody's threatening to harm U.S. soldiers or perform another terrorist attack, then we should be more concerned about them than anything else because of their attack. So it's one of those things like it's a really vague question, but generally speaking, we should be more concerned about our citizens within our borders than those out of our borders. Victimless crimes such as drug use should not be crimes at all. Well, this one depends. So, like a victimless crime, so like drug use, I would agree with. But if you hit my car and my car's parked on the road, even though I'm not there and a victim, that shit pisses me off. Or, you vandalize some of my property, that shit pisses me off. So, like, drug use, I would be in favor for, but other victimless crimes, like, there's always going to be some sort of victim, like destruction of public property. Like, there's not a victim there. Like, if they were going to go to your town museum and then break all the windows, well, who's going to pay for it? We are through our tax dollars. So I'd agree with the drug use, but if destruction of public property, I would disagree with. So I'm going to go with neutral on that one. Technology is not always beneficial. Yeah, I would say not always. Like advancements in technology can lead to beneficial things, but they can also lead to things that are unbeneficial as well. Like newer cars, for example, they have these great technologies. Like I think of the push button start rather than turn the key, just push the button to start. Well, what if it's cold and you need to crank the engine? It's a lot harder to do when you don't have a key. And then that stuff breaks and it's always more expensive. And then the other one, so a newer car, like you stop at a stoplight, it turns off the engine. That's going to wear out your starter. And that's not beneficial to the average driver to have a starter go out before it would go out with a different car just because you're more concerned about kind of some of the emissions coming on the car, so you have it automatically shut off at a stoplight. So I would agree on this one. Like it's a great thing to pursue new technology, but the new technology developed is not always beneficial. Most drugs should be legalized. Yes, I agree on that one. But as far as yeah, I agree with Dr. Zaus. Start stop is dumb as hell on anything. That's not a hybrid. Yep. I just think they're dumb because your starter's going to go out. And that's not something that you want. But also, like, starting it up, what if your car dies right there in the intersection? Like, what if your battery isn't up to snuff and you're going to get it fixed and all of a sudden you die right at a stoplight? And let's say it's winter, it's -20, it's cold outside. If I had one of those cars and that happened to me and I got frostbite, I'd sue the manufacturer. So, but yeah, they do it for different things. Like there's different technology. A lot of this technology in cars comes from regulations in California. So California will set a regulation, and Ford, GM, rather than saying, well, we're going to make two different cars, we're just going to make all cars up to the California regulations. That way, we only have to make one model of car. So, but back to this one, more drugs should be legalized. Yeah. So elections are a waste of resources. Now, the U.S. elections, I'd say we just do the state, House, Senate, President once every 4 years. Have it on a Friday, so if your candidate loses, you can just get drunk over the weekend. But as far as like elections a waste of resources, I disagree. I just wish there was one day every 4 years all elections were held. I supported regional unions such as the European Union. Yeah, I don't really care. They can kind of do whatever they want to on that financial thing. I did think it was kind of cool when Britain left the European Union, just to stick it to all those countries in Europe. But really, if they want to form those unions, if they formed one in the Middle East, a union like a trade union, I think that would be a good thing. So I'm going to say unsure. International aid is a waste of money. Disagree. So it depends on the form of aid, depends on how much, but as a general thing, I think international aid is a good way of providing humanitarian resources around the world. The Elder Society know the best path for it. Generally speaking, yes. I would trust the Elder Society more than the 18-year-olds, even the 21-year-olds. Probably as soon as people get up into their mid-20s, all the way to 75, would be probably the best path for it. So I would generally agree. It is not necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. See, if Kevin were here right now, me and him would have a disagreement because I believe sometimes it is necessary for the government to intervene to protect consumers. Now, that is less of kind of a free market idea, but there are times where it is necessary for the government to step in and say, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, or there's a limited amount of this you can do or a limited amount of that you can do. So there are times where it is necessary for the government to intervene to make sure that monopolies aren't created, free trades being created. There are rules, there are regulations. Now, on the flip side, there are times where the government institutes regulations and the company that can first work their way around those regulations is a little bit more successful, or the regulations affect some of the smaller companies. Like they won't affect the larger companies, they'll actually be advantage with the larger companies, and the smaller companies will kind of get screwed. But there are times where it is 100% necessary for the government to intervene to protect consumers. Traditions are important. I don't think so. Alliances are important for protecting a nation. I agree. Like the more alliances that we can have, the better off we can be. Now we have to look at some of those alliances and see how they're working. And the country I think of is Turkey. Like Turkey is such a very important ally against Russia, but they are also a complete asshole in the Middle East and Africa. So like it's one of those things. Yes, they are important, and yes, sometimes you have to make allies with countries that aren't the best, a la Turkey and Saudi Arabia. But they are a good force that can help us throughout the world. So yeah, I do agree that they are important. There should not be international law. This is a big can of worms. Like if they're talking international criminal law, or if they're talking like international business law, like there's like a law to cover everybody in the globe. Like trying to enforce something like that, I think would be more costly than what the law is trying to protect. But I do think like groups getting together and saying, these are certain trade agreements is a good thing that you should follow. This is why a lot of like the trade agreements, the Iran deal, I think it was the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Accord agreement, were not written like they were laws. They were written more like recommendations, and all countries kept the agreements there. So, like a lot of times internationally, they're not going to write a law saying if you break this, there are consequences. It is more written kind of like a recommendation than a rule because of the enforcement aspect of it, international law. So, because of that aspect, I think I will agree that there should not be, but it should be something like what we've done in the past with certain agreements where there's really, it's something for everybody to strive for, but trying to police somebody who breaks it will be awful and expensive. So Saudi Arabia helps keeps our oil prices down, don't they? I think it's more them as far as Russia. So most of our oil, our exports, we import most of our oil from Canada, and I think we export a bunch of oil to Canada. We import some from Mexico. We export a bunch to Mexico. Like Mexico, Canada, and us are kind of like the kind of trade with one another. And so, like the oil prices here do it. I think the oil prices going down hurt more Iran and Russia than they do the United States. But the oil prices, Saudi dropping the oil prices also affects U.S. business if they can produce enough to get into the market with Canada and Mexico. But yeah, it's more kind of the Middle East there that's attacking Russia is what Saudi Arabia tries to keep the oil prices down for. But I think it's naive to say that it wouldn't affect us because if they can flood the market, it hurts our economy as well. So there's no need for a national government. I will disagree. So, like, the thing is with the national government, you have to have national issues like the military, for instance. If we didn't have the military presence that we would have, the Mexican cartel would have probably taken back Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and looking to be pushing forward. Because you can't have a sovereign nation without a government, a military, or alliances. But the national government also does a bunch of different things. But if you didn't have a national government, I know there's some places that it exists, but you're only one war away from being invaded. So, like Greece and Exarchia right now, the government of Greece might go into that autonomous community and just wipe everybody out. Like they have the resources, they have the military. I don't know if they'd want the PR to do so, but yeah, without having a national government, they would have no way to fight back. So, Rojava, like if Turkey decided to declare out all-out war on the Kurds, they would really have no way to fight back without having some outside help, without like a centralized government. And centralized government also allows help for trade routes, protecting trade routes. Because if you want to be in the global economy and you can't protect your trade, You can produce all these products, but if pirates take them over, then you're producing these pirates and they get stolen and you're not making money. Then you're having a set of your own pirates or own military protecting them. Like, yeah, there is a need for a national government. When people have already suffered for technology to be developed, we should use that technology. So I'm going to disagree. And I'm going to say, like, we should use the best technology, not just technology that people suffered to be developed. Like, the technology we should use is the best. And whether people suffered to develop it or whether people didn't suffer to develop it, the best technology is king. Tradition just hinders the progress of technology. It can or it can't. I mean, I don't see what tradition like has to do with like the technology sector. The technology sector is generally not political at all. They're just a bunch of nerds looking at different ways that they can manipulate structures or they can manipulate technology to develop a better product. So I don't see how tradition kind of fits into that aspect. Technological process is usually good. Yeah, I'll agree. International trade is generally beneficial. It is. It is generally beneficial. So being in a global economy is very beneficial. The government should support and recognize only one religion. This is the United States, not Turkey. So, or Iran. So there's whatever religion you want to be, that's fine. So just go over in this comment. People suffered for the development of new medicine and vaccines. Doesn't mean we shouldn't use them. Like you said, we must use the best. Yeah. I think I was talking to somebody about like clinical trials last night. So like you can make a lot of money for doing clinical trials for like vaccines or new medicines. So they go through the process, they kill a bunch of rats and they kill a bunch of rabbits. I don't think they do apes anymore. And then they move on to human clinical trials. And they generally pay people a certain amount of money. Some people get the placebo, some people get the actual stuff, and they see how it works in that person. So see if the drug works. And there's generally money. There can be adverse side effects. The conversation that we had yesterday was when they develop a COVID vaccine, if they're going to pay you $2,000 to try it, are you going to try it? And the individual I was talking to said, yeah, I'll try it. And I was like, no, I'm going to need about 100 grand to try it. And I'm like, really? And it's like, yeah, because if something goes wrong, you're in a clinical trial, you're basically screwed. And then the doctors are not going to know how to fix you. Like, there is risk associated with these clinical trials. And it's got to be a significant amount of money for me to try it, especially a new drug along those lines. So, yeah. So, traditions have no value of their own. I will disagree. Some people that follow different traditions have a value. And then Progressive Apostate says he's a cheap whore. Well, hopefully not too cheap. Well, you know, he says, I don't mind selling my body for easy money. You know, they do have brothels in Nevada. It is the safest form of prostitution. That way you don't get murdered in some back alley. So traditions have no value of their own. I think they do have some value. You know, to what extent that value is, you know, that's kind of up in the air. But I do think they have some value. Like, especially if they are a tradition that leads people to being more peaceful in their daily lives or being nicer to their neighbors. Like, there is some value there with tradition. Genetic modification should be used rarely, if ever. And this is kind of GMOs in food. And It depends. So like a bunch of our corn is genetically modified, so it produces more corn. Does that affect like the food quality and the flavor? Some people say yes. I'm more inclined to kind of say no. Like they're not adding any chemicals, they're just modifying it. So they're expediting the evolution process to make the corn produce more ears for human consumption. It's not like they're changing it to do a bunch of different things. They're just making the plant grow to grow more corn. Now, I know some people like, oh, that's not natural, that's not this, but if it doesn't really matter to me when I buy seeds, whether they're GMOs or not. Like when I buy seeds for the garden, doesn't matter. So it should be washed, it should be regulated, it should be tested, but I think that they should be used until proven otherwise. People should have to work for anything that they get. Generally speaking, yes. But, it's one of those things you look here and you say, well, somebody who's like disabled, whether they have MS, cerebral palsy, somebody like that, we could probably find some jobs in society for them to do, but they're not going to be able to get stuff unless they create kind of a YouTube channel or find some other way. So, but there should be some certain level for people with disabilities to get stuff. Now, I know there's kind of like welfare, there's going to be some that commit fraud where they abuse the system. So, there's the things you got to watch out for there, but people that actually need it, like I think that they should be able to get it and get help. But the people that don't need it, that are just abusing the system, need to have something thrown at them so they can wake up and say that's not what the system's for. The system's for people that actually need it. So I'm going to slightly disagree on this one. So theocracy is a good system of government. Nope. Strongly disagree. People should vote by issue by issue themselves. So I guess what this is saying, so rather than vote for a candidate, you list the issues and people vote for them individually. But I don't. Yeah, that one's tough because one of the reasons why the representative democracy or representative republic that we have in the United States is so great is like the government, these agents, they get paid to research the views. And a lot of times they vote partisan and it doesn't really matter. But they have more information than the general public who's working some other job 40 hours a week. Like they will have more access to information that we may not have. But they will also have more time to research these things. So people voting issue by issue, one video could come out and make you change your mind, without being able to do the research as far as for the voting. So I'm going to disagree on that one. Police need more power and protection. Yeah. I would generally say, I wish that said training. More power and protection. I don't really know what that means. So like more power and protection, like they are a protection force. They have a bunch of equipment. But as far as like more power to do what? Force the law, they already do that. So like I would be in favor for them getting more training, but more power and protection. Not sure what that means. Laws should not be based on religion. Agree. Those who disagree with the government should be removed from the country. Yeah. This isn't Azerbaijan. This isn't Turkey. This isn't some fascist state. Like, the one thing in America is you could say, fuck the president, and that's your right to do so. You don't necessarily even have that right in Europe. So they shouldn't be removed from the country unless they want to leave. So strongly disagree. I believe there is something after death. Yeah, it's called the breakdown of your body tissue to turn you into humus. But this is a theocratic thing, something after life. So I'll disagree. Public utilities like roads and electricity should be public owned. They already are. Like it is one of those things like it's one thing the federal government actually helps out a bunch of the states for is the roads. Now, electricity, there's some private roads to different houses, but electricity, as far as it's produced, its production, I would disagree on that one because we've seen how that event works out. One of the things you look at the history of Iran is when they nationalized their oil production in their country went down. So I do agree with the roads, but I disagree with electricity. So it's going to go neutral. Our culture would be better mixed with other countries mixed in. Well, really, like kind of the boiling pots really only happens in America, Canada, and somewhat in Europe. You go to the Middle East. There's a little bit in the Middle East, but you go to Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, even Malaysia, Indonesia, there's not much there as far as other cultures being mixed in. So, as far as that, I think all cultures would be. But yeah, the American culture is good because there's other cultures mixed in. People should hold more loyalty to their local state than to their country. Everybody in Texas would hit strongly agree. Probably the same thing in Wyoming. But some states, they don't really care. So I would say as a general, you want to hold more to your country than your state. I know a lot of people are very proud about where they come from, but I think your state should be first. Your country should be first. So Dr. Zhao says, but utility companies are regulated similar to how a public corporation would be. Yeah, that's true. But I just don't know if the government would be able to do it as effectively. One of the arguments that libertarians make, of course, for the roads is, if they were not publicly, they were privately funded, they would be better. There would be less road construction. Because one of the jokes out here in the West, because we have hotter summers and then really cold winters, and the roads need repair every year, is the state bird of all our states is the construction cone. And that's one of the arguments they say is, well, it'd be better in private hands, but private hands don't have the money or wouldn't spend the money because they're not going to get much out of it unless they put toll roads up everywhere, which not a single person in the world likes toll roads. They may like what they fund, but they hate going through them. So the next one, people should not have protections that could hinder discovering their criminal activity. So that's interesting. Like protections that could hinder discovering their criminal activity. So he's talking about maybe spying on people. But I don't know what other protections that you could have that would hinder discovering their criminal activity. So I am not sure. So I'm going to put neutral. People should have their power to choose their leaders. Yeah, I strongly agree there. Illegal immigrants do not provide benefit to the hosting country. This is the third time we've had this same question, just rewritten 3 different ways. So they do supply a benefit. Yeah, we've had this question before too. And it just depends on what the higher power is. Yeah, libertarian roads would definitely be a nightmare, especially like removing of snow. and that sort of thing. Genetic modification is a force for good, even on humans. How would you genetically modify humans? Are we going to start growing them in petri dishes and then injecting them into people? Like, that would be interesting on humans. Like, you get some genetic traits. Like, oh, well, 6'9", very intelligent, very athletic, play defensive end, loves the New York Jets. If you can genetically modify somebody into that mold, that would be very interesting. I think a lot of people would go for that as well. So maybe on humans, yeah, I'm saying even on humans it would be good as long as it doesn't go too far. Nobody but me can adequately represent my views. Yeah. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. Is it? I guess it could be an ideology where people worship the idea where they're making the decisions. But really, that's what it is, just a decision-making process. I mean, Zaus and Mike, everybody would get a huge penis mod. And then we'd create another Joe Namath in the lab to win us a Super Bowl. Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. I knew you were in the chat just hanging out. But yeah, genetic modification in humans, I don't think that would necessarily be a bad thing. If you can genetically modify somebody to be less susceptible to some diseases as well as another part of it. So democracy is more in the decision-making process. I'll disagree. Absolute freedom makes society dangerous. Yes, it does. We've seen it. What happens in Mexico? Absolute freedom ends up into you being ran by the drug cartel or the biggest person with the biggest gun or the people with the biggest group of people with the biggest guns. So yeah, absolute freedom is dangerous to a society. Unless it's like we can genetically modify people to all think the same and not be violent towards one another, which has never been done in human history. To chase progress at all cost is dangerous. Well, it depends on what progress you are chasing, but anything at all cost is dangerous because you may end up doing some things that you may regret later. So I will agree. The wealthy have far more than they need. Yeah, probably. I mean, they probably have far more than what you need, but I don't believe that because they made this amount that all of a sudden we should go in and pull a full Batman and take it away from them. Like, they probably have way more than what they need, but the system's not fair. The quicker you get used to it, the better. So I will agree that they have far more than what they need. It's a good idea to test a policy in one state rather than implement it nationwide right away. Probably depends on the policy, but I can't really think of something like I automatically think of gun control, and one of the reasons why people, say, "Oh, California has strict gun control," it doesn't work because Nevada doesn't. So, like in that case, you implement it in one state, it's not going to be effective because it wasn't implemented nationwide. But I mean, as a test and proving ground, saying if it costs, it's going to cost you $50 billion nationwide to implement, but you started out in Wyoming, and maybe it's $500 million to start it in Wyoming. You start it there, and it doesn't work. Then you just bank that other $49.5 billion and look at something else. So It can be, but it also cannot be. So I'm going to be neutral. We have no right to military intervene in other nations. So disagree. Strongly disagree. Because in situations, if we don't, nobody else will. Governments should be accountable to the international community. It depends on what the international community is made out of and who's in it. One of the problems with the United Nations Human Rights Council is most of the nations on it do not favor human rights as we would know it in America. So if you can, the international community could have a set of standards, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for them to go through and go out and say, well, these are our standards, hit these standards. But they have to be based upon basic human rights, which, the U.S., the UN, the international community doesn't really have countries that believe in those basic human rights. So maybe. So I'm going to say disagree because I'm going to say that current international community, the way it's set up, the way it's structured, is something that is not something I don't think government should be accountable to. We are first and foremost citizens of the earth. Yeah, sure. I mean, we are all citizens of the earth, I guess. I don't, you're first and foremost children of your parents, whoever they are. Whether you're up for adoption, your adopted family, you're first and foremost the children there. And then second would be probably the state or country that you're in. And then after that would be Earth. So I'm going to disagree. People's freedoms should have no limits. I disagree. You cannot go out and shoot somebody. You're not free to harass somebody. You're not free to rape somebody. So I'm going to disagree. All societies are a blend of cultures. That is false. And all we have to do, we kind of mentioned this earlier, but, Japan's a good one. South Korea, China, they are not as blended of a culture as America is, even as Mexico is. Even though Mexico, a large percentage of the population is Mexican, they also have some Asian people and they also have some white European descent in Mexico as well. Not all societies are a blend of cultures. There are some monoliths in the world. Immigrants should be expected to learn the language of their country. It would be to their own benefit to do so. If you're going to go somewhere, you're going to immigrate somewhere, learning the language of that country is only going to benefit you to do so. And expecting them to learn the language of the country, eventually, but probably not immediately. It depends on the length of their stay. But I guess with immigrants means they're going to stay there for a long time. They're planning on moving their residence, so they should be expected to learn the language of the country for their own benefit. So I'm going to agree on that one. Now, I would, if they were seasonal immigrants, so some of our Peruvian sheep herders, where really they only talk to the dogs and the sheep and each other and maybe their boss. Do they really have to? No. But taking immigrants as people that are actually moving here to relocate here, they should learn language because it's going to be to their own benefit. Now, the next one, public opinion swings too much with emotional events to be useful in policy making. I will say that's generally true. You look at the past month or so with the protests and all the movements to defund the police. That is an emotional thing. People getting emotional seeing the murder of George Floyd, getting emotional, but they haven't thought about the consequences of the actual abolition of the police, what that would look like. But if they were allowed to make policy, that first couple weeks afterwards, we wouldn't have any police, and the United States of America would be a scary place. So environmental regulations are essential. I'm going to say strongly agree. Now, what I will say is there's some that are really not that reasonable, and the Environmental Protection Agency has the biggest stick in the government, like as far as what they can do, how they can shut you down. But they are immune when they do it themselves. Like they released some mine tailings into the San Juan River in Colorado, and if a company would have done that, there would have been jail time. There would have been a lot, but because the EPA did it, they got nothing. But their regulations, for the most part, it one of the things, coal mines, the EPA and also MSHA has done a lot in the way of, hindering them and their ability, but it's for the best. So as long as environmental regulations can be science based rather than political based, they are 100% essential. When they jump over and start becoming more politically based than science based, then they become less essential. Diplomatic options should always be tried before war is even considered. Well, I think they are. They should be tried, but I think they are. But there's some people who won't even talk to you, won't even reason to you, and say, well, these gas bombs were a false flag. It was actually performed by America, so you can't really argue with them. You can't really discuss that situation with that person. Or if somebody invades. So if tomorrow Azerbaijan and Turkey invade Armenia, are we going to try diplomacy, or are we going to go in and try to stop them from taking over Armenia? We would go in before trying to perform diplomacy because they acted first. So I'm not going to say always. They should be as a general rule, but if somebody invades somebody else, you're not really going to try diplomacy. You're going to go in and try to stunt that invasion. And there's also the issue of, trying to go in, trying to remove leaders. Like, I would disagree with this. Like, it's definitely a good thing to try diplomatic options. But if another country has started an act of aggression and that's the point you want to be diplomatic, that's way not far enough. So it is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure the welfare for all citizens. So this is an economic question. Now, the United States does run a deficit. And someday, the United States is going to have to find a way to pay back all the money they owe. Now, one of the interesting things around the world is almost every country runs a deficit. So the Middle East was famous for a while for not running one. But they were really the only places not running a deficit. So eventually the whole world's going to come to the same problem. But we don't want to go full Argentina, where we go modern monetary policy, where our solution to our debt is just to print more money and try to eliminate welfare by printing more money. Because then your Toyota Corolla is going to be $500,000 American. So it's one of those things, like, it could be either way. Like, a balanced budget would definitely be ideal for America and the world, to not spend. But yeah, it's kind of give and take. So I'm going to say I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say welfare for all citizens is better than. So just to react to some of the comments, that's what Nightmare Fuel changed my mind on a few years back. Intervention. We just can't stand by and let acts of aggression happen to innocent people and countries. Yeah, but that's kind of the MO of the U.S. in the current situation in the world, is we are kind of letting things happen. We let the Russians take Crimea. We let the Russians and the Iranians come in and help Assad almost win the war. We're letting Turkey go in to harass the Kurds. Like as far as our policy, our decisions, our situations, the United States is getting more isolationist around the globe. And so, yeah, there are some situations where we do need to intervene. Like that Crimea situation, yeah, we should have intervened. But now Russia occupies that area. And to go in and try to retake that, it's going to be a mess. And there are other situations where there's other countries intervening around the world that we're just sitting there and doing nothing. So Iran's another one too. Iran's been a little shithead in the Middle East. So the Yemen war, for example. Of course, you'll never see that from the other side, but yeah, the Yemen war, arming the Houthis and that conflict and that humanitarian crisis. So, but getting back to the quiz, people should be given the freedom whenever it causes little security risk. Yeah? So the security risk is the big one. So only extremely talented immigrants should be permitted to enter the country. Now, I think we should pursue talented immigrants, but at the same time, there's our agriculture industry that needs some of the less talented immigrants. So we're not just going to pluck away everybody from Southeast Asia. Everybody educated from Southeast Asia can come, but everybody from Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, and some of these other countries cannot. That would adversely affect our agricultural market. So I'm going to disagree. So religion should be removed from everything in our government. Yeah, it should be. The government should monitor all citizens to combat terrorism. Ooh. So I'm going to probably end up disagreeing with this, but not probably for the reason that a lot of people would. I'm saying there's no reason for the government to monitor grandma in the nursing home. She doesn't pose a threat. I would say probably age classifications. The very old, there's no reason in the world to monitor them. Now, people with ties to the Middle East, they would be somebody ties to Russia. They would be somebody to monitor. But even then, even monitoring people, I think it would just have to be based on phone numbers they call out to in those countries, because you're not going to listen to 9 million hours of phone calls. So I'm going to disagree because of the cost of the system it would be to monitor all systems, the need to monitor all systems, and the effectiveness that you could monitor all citizens. Automation overall is extremely good for society. I'm going to agree on this one, even though there's some jobs that are being put away. But looking at it from an ergonomic standpoint, we mentioned the one earlier with trade schools, but just from an ergonomic standpoint, automation is protecting backs, they're protecting wrists, they're protecting knees, they're protecting workers from soft tissue injuries. They are eliminating jobs, which is a hazard, but less workers overall are getting hurt because of automation. And looking at it from a health and safety aspect, I would say it's extremely good for society. Now, of course, it's overall, but just from a health and safety aspect, it's good. But overall, there are some jobs lost. And so this is where it kind of gets interesting, because it should be, I imagine, neutral, because job loss would put you in the disagree. But the occupational health and safety put you in the Greeks, so we're protecting more workers from automation. We're making industry safer because of automation. We're making things faster because of automation. So I do think the pros on automation outweigh the cons. So I'm going to generally say it's good. The freer the market, the freer the people. Another libertarian question here. Now, generally speaking, I say yes. So I would say yes. The freer the market, the freer the people. Yeah, generally it's going to be yes. So now just to address a comment in the chat. So my opinion on UBI and negative income tax. So I would actually support more UBI than the negative income tax. So I get the arguments for the negative income tax and not UBI, but I still like the idea of giving people actual money rather than giving them money in one lump sum at tax season. I think 12,000 is over the years better than 12,000 at one point. So, like, people can rely on the UBI for rent and other things. So I think UBI is a better option as far as that. Now, as far as the argument, people not getting it, not needing it, I don't care. You can just give it to everybody universally across the board. And then if you get it and you don't need it, donate it to somebody who does. Like, I think it would be a good benefit for it to replace the welfare system that's currently stated. Replace welfare, food stamps, Social Security with UBI would kind of be where I'd go out with the UBI. Now, as far as if the math works out on that or not, I don't know, but that would be my general opinion. Replace some of these social programs. Now, I wouldn't replace disability. Disability would be different, but as far as like UBI, replacing Social Security, replacing welfare, replacing food stamps with UBI. Do you think both simultaneously would be beneficial? I mean, they could, but I think you just got to do one or the other. I know more people kind of a little bit more economically right than I am are going to favor the negative income tax. But for me, I like the idea of giving people cash or a check once a month so they can pay their bills once a month rather than giving a lump sum that they blow like they do at tax season. Okay, subdivisions should not be able to be exempt from national laws. Anybody in the chat have any more information on this? I don't think subdivisions are exempt from national laws. Like, would that be like a private property thing? Like, I don't get how subdivisions could be their own autonomous community. Like, talking about homeowners association, like, I don't understand. Okay. A better world will come from automation, science, and technology. Strongly agree. That, and if we get rid of Assad and Putin and Iran. So, religious organizations often provide better assistance to the poor than the government does. I disagree with this, actually 100%. Now, some religious organizations are better than others. The Mormons are really good. They have a food pantry and stuff like that, and they do really good work as far as humanitarian stuff. Habitat for Humanity is another one that does really good work. Like, there's some that are Salvation Army. There are some really good, but your regular run-of-the-mill Southern Baptist church, your Lutheran church, they're not doing much. They're buying Corvettes for their pastors is what they're doing. But the government, all 50 states providing for those people, I think it does do a better job at assisting the poor as far as like welfare than the religious organizations do. So, disagree. Capitalism is better than any existing alternative. 100%. Yeah. Like, there's not. a better alternative currently to capitalism. I am proud to be in my country. Absolutely. Each person should have one vote, each equal to every other. So I think what this is getting at is away from the Electoral College. Now, I would be more in favor of a distribution of each state rather than winner take all. Like, for instance, in Wyoming. So, Wyoming has 3 electoral votes and about 33% vote Democrat. So, if you're a Democrat and you campaign in Wyoming and you get 1/3 of the vote, you get 1 electoral vote in Wyoming. You're in a state like California where I think 40% votes Republican, and they're the most populous state. And California actually has more Republicans than most states in the West. You're a Republican, you can boost that number and get 40%. Well, you're going to get 2/5 of the electoral votes in California. And same thing, Florida's 50-50. So you get 50% of the vote, the electoral votes in those. So it makes every state competitive, gives some politician a competitive advantage to go to each state versus right now they just go to swing states. And if you just went to direct vote, one person, one vote, they would just New York, California, Texas, Florida. All the rest of the states wouldn't be that big of a deal. So I'm going to disagree with this one. Any deals other countries want must be bad for us. No, they can be mutual beneficial to both parties. They can just benefit us and not benefit them. So I'm going to disagree on this one. Leaders must be strong, or the nation will suffer. No, there are strong leaders who are dictators, and the nation suffers. So I'm going to disagree. Like our leader right now in the U.S., he's a quote-unquote strong man using the quotey fingers. But our nation is really struggling with this pandemic. So, like, the leader being strong or being weak isn't that beneficial either way. Border protection is important. It can be, it cannot be. So, using the United States as an example, at our northern border protection is not that important. At our southern border, where there's been the second deadliest conflict in the world the last 4 years in Mexico, the drug war in Mexico, it's probably more important so we don't get spillover into the United States with that conflict. So it depends on the border. All humans share a common identity in that we are human. We are Homo sapiens. So yeah, I'll agree on that one. Stronger the leadership, the better. No, the better the leader, the better. But that's where it becomes interesting because is stronger in this case meaning a better leader, or is it meaning a more authoritarian leader? Because a really strong leader, somebody who's a really good leader, has really great leadership skills, is going to be better. Hands down. If Jocko Willenick ran for president, he's a very strong leader. Donald Trump thinks he's a strong leader, but he's not that great of a leader. He doesn't have those leadership skills. It's always somebody else's fault rather than taking personal responsibility. But if it's meaning strong in the point where it's like a leader, a dictator, it's not that great because he's not a leader. So I'm going to say I agree, but this may skew the results, but my definition of strong leadership is somebody who's actually a good leader. He's a better leader than somebody who's a weak leader. Somebody you can walk all over, somebody who's a dictator who, rather than leading the people, cracks the whip on the people. My nation is closer to my views than most other nations in the world. Yeah, probably. So, but there are things I wish it could improve on. But yeah, closer to my views than most of the nations in the world, I'd say I agree. Local governments give each region good representation of their views. They do, but they are also limited as far as the scope and as far as how much money they can bring in and what services they can provide. So they are limited, but they are a good representation of how certain geographic or cultural regions feel. The poor choose to be poor. Now, there's probably quite a few people that are going to disagree on this one because some do, but also some don't. So I'll probably end up going neutral on this one. So one of the things, we had one discussion the other day with a couple individuals on this actually specific issue. There's a difference between somebody who's poor, let's say living in Salt Lake City, where you can get out of that relatively easy, versus somebody who's living in the south side of Chicago, where you can't. It's just systematic poverty, where there's no escaping that poverty. Nobody's coming to help you. There's really no way to get out without doing what you have to survive. So it really depends on what area you're in, whether you make that choice or not. Because there's some areas where it is 100% the case where they have the opportunity to succeed, but they choose not to. And I think of living in Iowa where people would, rather than going and trying to get a better job, they would go work at Taco Bell and make sure they didn't work enough hours each week to make sure they still got their welfare check coming in. Rather than going and trying to get a better job and getting a better life, that was kind of their life. They were choosing to live in that poverty cycle by not trying to better themselves. But like you said, the south side of Chicago, like that dumpster fire of a place, there's no escaping it. And there are other communities, Baltimore's another one, where there's no escaping that poverty. And something needs to be done to, help those people out so they can make that decision, whether they choose to be poor, whether they choose to work and be successful. So I'm going to go neutral because it depends on the situation that it's in. Elections are an effective way of showing government approval. Yeah. I mean, because if you're not approved by the people, you get voted out. Unless you live in a country where the elections are rigged, like Russia, or Syria. But they are an effective way of showing the government approval. And some of the most accurate polls are going to be your exit polls from elections. So like every day you'll see people like, oh, well, this new poll says X is true, or a certain amount of people believe Y. That those polls are going to be limited in their sample size and what they can accomplish. But exit polls are a great way of showing the opinion at the time of the nation, getting a wide demographic into the poll, getting large numbers of people to perform the polls. But there are also things, so you're more likely to get polled at elections if you live in a swing state than you are if you're in a really blue state or a red state. So there are some things there, but as far as the general votes and the votes coming in, yeah, they are 100% an effective way of showing government approval. National cultures are important to protect. Yes and no. So like the whole the American culture where we believe that we're better than everybody else, that is an important thing to protect rather than everybody shitting on the country that you're in. But if you're National Socialist or Syrian nationalist, that's not as important to protect. So, a lot of these questions are so vague, and you can choose either side depending on how you're going to view the question. But I'll say this is neutral, and it's one of those things that just depends on where you live and what country. The benefits of open borders would outweigh the cost. It depends on how many people you got coming in and what type of people you have coming in. So I'm probably going to disagree because I don't believe that open borders are the right move because there's probably 2 billion people that want to come and live in America, which would be a bad thing. But limited immigration or seasonal immigration, especially in our agriculture sector, like we brought up with kind of the immigration before, would be a huge benefit. But open borders, yeah, I don't agree with open borders. The government should not break up monopolies. Yeah, I'll agree. They should not create them either. A united world government would be beneficial to mankind. The deep state, the new world order, they already rule everything. But yeah, if it was the US being that government, yeah. But if it was Russia being that government, no. It depends on who the government ruling party is. So I'm going to be neutral on that one as well, because it really depends on who's the ruling government. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. Yeah, there's a lot of like satellite stuff. Like you think of the Uyghur situation in China, a lot of what we know that's going on, because China is kind of a closed country, is because of satellite imagery. We're seeing them build more of these camps over there because of satellites, the government performing surveillance. As far as phone tapping and stuff, I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. Like, they're not going to listen to 8 million hours of tape to look for beneficial clues, to look for words. But there's some cases where there may be higher profile individuals that it may be warranted. So I do think it's necessary for the modern world. Abortion should be legal in all cases. Sure. I don't really care. It's not my baby. I don't care. Now, if it is my baby, that's a different story. That's kind of interesting because, you are half of the required equipment to make that baby. And you should have some sort of say, but at the same time, it's not growing in my belly. So, yeah, I think I would rather verge on it should be legal in all cases. Sex outside of marriage is immoral. Yeah, we're just going to hit strongly disagree on that one. People should have equal opportunity to succeed. Absolutely. War is needed to make an economy thrive. I mean, there's a lot of economic things that go into like just war and military bases in general. Like San Diego, for instance, the naval base in San Diego is a big portion of their economy. You take that away, San Diego's hurting. They're going to have less people. And so, but war in general, going to a country performing war to make the economy thrive, I generally disagree with. But as far as like the military aspect of it, I would agree with. So I'm going to say generally yes, because there's never been a point in history where the human race hasn't been at war. So a national government must be strong to adequately protect all its citizens. Yeah. And this would be one to go back down to Mexico. Government's not that strong. So if the government's not that strong, the cartel comes in, and the citizens that live in areas that aren't part of the cartel are at risk for some of the things the cartel does. So, yeah, it must be strong to adequately, but that has certain limits. You don't want to get into kind of a national socialist or communist, Russian communist type of government where, well, the government's so strong that it's actually not protecting its citizens anymore, it's killing its citizens. Laws should vary from area to area and culture to culture within a country. Um, Area to area, yes, but culture to culture, maybe. Like that's well, I'll say yes on that one too, because there's a difference between like here out in the country and then somewhere in the inner cities. So like laws here with firearms, you can open carry, you can go places. You may not even see another person where you're going out to the sagebrush or into the woods. But in the inner city, walking down to City Hall with a rifle strapped in your back, yeah, that may be not as a great of thing. So I'm going to say yes on this one. The government must be by the people, for the people. Yeah, strongly agree there. There are many issues that does not appear to make sense to address at a local level. Yes, this is 100% true. So like roads, we talked about roads a little bit earlier. The local governments do not have the money to adequately perform construction on the roads, infrastructure. Military. Yeah, you hear military at a local level? Yeah, that's one of the things when people are like, oh, well, Texas or California is succeeding from the Union. They're going to have to build up a military to defend themselves from the United States. It's not something that's economically friendly. So, yes, it does not make sense, or there are many issues that does not make sense to address at the local level. Welfare programs as well. Like local communities do not have as much funding as the federal government. Religion is beneficial for society. It's going to be neutral. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Like, bring back up the Mormons. Like, for the most part, Mormons, good people. Okay. But if the Taliban comes in and their version of jihad, they're not going to be beneficial for society. So it depends on the situation, depends on the religion, depends on what they want out of their religion. So I'm going to be neutral. Local governments should have more power than they currently do. But what would they do with that power? They need more money than what they currently do. With more power, what are they going to do? More parades? More fireworks on the 4th of July? Like, yeah, local governments already have a good portion of power. Their problem is they just don't have the financial backing to do everything that the federal government has. So I'm going to disagree on this one. Hold on. Dog was just piping up. Hey. All right, I support gay marriage. Yeah. Now, as far as like marriage, you should have the option to get married if you want to, but it shouldn't be a bad thing if you don't want to get married as well. Like, it's one of those things, like, if you want to go into it, it's one of those things that they've made it actually tax beneficial to go into. And so if you're against that, then you're depriving people of some of the tax incentives for getting married. Now, of course, marriages, 50% of them or more end up in divorce. Once you get divorced, then it becomes a financial nightmare. And then you have to divvy up some of your stuff, divvy up some of your money. If you have kids, then there's the child support or alimony. So like there should be more education on the issue of marriage and why you should or should not be, but everybody should be able to. Like there's no issue like with two people getting married. A country must be sure to take all measures to enforce its laws. Sure. I mean, there's no reason to have a law if you can't enforce it. If there's a law that's unenforceable, it shouldn't be on the books. Only our national languages should be spoken in our country. I'm going to disagree on this one. Like, I mean, if you're going to move here, you're going to live here. It's going to be to your benefit to learn English. But if you want to speak another language, like for instance in your own home, there's no issue with that. So there is no need for local or state governments. Yes, there's a need for local and state governments. A lot of the services that the federal government may be out of tune with, you don't want to be ruled by Washington. Like there's a need, but there's a limited scope at what they are able to accomplish. A nation needs a military in order to survive. Yeah, absolutely. If you can't defend your borders, then somebody's going to take you over, or crime's going to take you over. Separation between church and state? Absolutely. If you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't care about the government having access to your communications. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the government's not going to listen to 9 million hours, or there's 300 million people in this country. If you talk on the phone, say everybody averages 1 hour, that's 300 million hours a day. Or your Facebook post or whatever. Like there's no reason the government would do this in the first place. They don't have the financial or the resources to track all this information. So it's one of those things like people use kind of as a scare tactic, but there's no feasible way for them to do this. So I guess I'll just go agree, I guess. It is important to maintain law and order. Yeah, it is very important to maintain law and order. A nation must obey its leadership without question. Disagree, but realize there may be consequences to your actions. But without question, you can question it. So, human-caused climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life. Yeah. Yeah, and one of the aspects that I don't think is brought up a lot in the climate change discussion is the desertification of the world. We are losing water rapidly. And so we are creating more deserts. You can say, well, the air quality, the CO2 emissions, what have you. But the fact that we're creating more deserts, we're going to run into a food and water shortage at some point. And that's absolutely terrifying. So one of the things that individuals can do, this could be done at an individual level, doesn't necessarily have to be at a government level, is permaculture. Like you can grow your own food, but you can also just grow plants that you don't have to mow the lawn that often. Create more shade, keep more water in the soil, and prevent it from evaporating up into the atmosphere. Like on an individual level, I think like food's forestry, growing food, not lawns. But even if you don't want to deal with the picking of the fruit or whatever, just plant more trees, create more shade, have your ground filled with a mulch layer to build your soil to hold that water in the soil. That way, less of it evaporates into the atmosphere. So it is one of the current issues, and I'm more along the lines of desertification than I am of air quality at this point. So yeah, it's something to look into. There's a few videos on YouTube that you can look into as far as desertification of different things, how we're creating more deserts. And there are solutions other than personal building food forests. There's directional grazing. There's a lot more that goes into it. But yeah, it is a great threat. But the biggest threat isn't necessarily the sea level rising. It's us running out of water and running out of places to grow food. Like if something happened to Iowa and Nebraska, where we couldn't grow corn for a year, we'd be in hurt that year for food. Because you can pretty much grow anything in eastern Nebraska and Iowa, eastern South Dakota as well. It is important that the government follows the majority of opinion, even though it's wrong. Disagree. So this is the thing about having a representative republic. Like the public may not have the best opinion on the issue because they don't know all the facts. They haven't researched it thoroughly. They may have caught a propaganda video from another government. So it is the role of government to do the right thing, whether the people agree with it or not. Traditional medicines are often more effective than modern medicines. So I'll disagree because modern medicines, they do a lot of research, they do a lot of testing as far as the effectiveness. But I do think there's too many people taking way too many pharmaceuticals as well, creating superbugs. When some of the things could be treated with a traditional medicine. Like one of the ones that you can actually grow, because we were talking about growing stuff, is elderberries. Elderberries, like you can make your own cough syrup out of it, and it's something natural that can grow in your thing. And you can just take a shot of it every day during the fall and winter and prevent yourself from getting a flu. Well, it's not 100% to prevent yourself, but it's a natural remedy right there as a traditional medicine that was used by Native Americans. So it's one of those things, like there are some good things, like turmeric's another one for anti-inflammation. Like there are some like natural herbs, natural remedies that can help you, and then you can grow them or you can buy them and you could have them in your life. But generally they're not as effective as modern medicines, but too many people resort to modern medicines and go and get all these pharmaceuticals when really they don't have to. Like it should be one of those things like pharmaceuticals. There's some instances you get surgery, pain relievers, yeah. But if you have a headache, ibuprofen or replacing ibuprofen with turmeric for the inflammation would be something that may benefit you rather than taking ibuprofen. And then ibuprofen is one of those things kind of like alcohol or caffeine. The more you take it, the more you have to take. So there is some value to like traditional medicines, but the modern medicines are more like super powered. So, but yeah, they're not more effective, but they do have benefits. Everybody should speak at least 2 languages. Only if it's going to benefit you. There's no reason to speak 2 languages in America unless your second language is Spanish. But even then, like everybody's going to speak majority English anyway. From each according to his ability to each according to his need. Nope. Like I don't mind that each according to his need, like as far as like the welfare aspect of government. But the key word there being need. Like there's a difference between a want and a need. And so somebody needing something, I have no issue with that. But somebody wanting something or manufacturing a need, there's more of an issue. But yeah, this is communism, so we're going to disagree on that one. So right now we are about getting there, 141 out of 216. So a group of states without a strong national government is merely an alliance, not a nation. Yeah, true. The government should not regulate the economy at all. Disagree. But they also shouldn't over-regulate the economy as well. Like they should regulate portions of the economy, but they shouldn't over-regulate it to create kind of a competitive advantage for one company or the other. It should just be regulated so it's maintaining equality of opportunity rather than equality of outcome. Society cannot function without leaders and followers. Yeah, probably true. So all companies are going to be ran by leaders, and sometimes the leaders are worse than other ones, and the company suffers. But yeah, without people to lead, it would be a mess. People should have the right to leave their wealth to their descendants. Yeah, absolutely agree. I know some people like, oh, well, the kids didn't earn it anyway, but the parents earn it. They can do what they want with that money. Excessive government intervention is a threat to the economy. Yes, this is also true. Now, the government should intervene, but it shouldn't intervene excessively. People should think for themselves as citizens of their nation rather than of their state. Sure. I don't think it matters either way. So I'll go neutral on that one. State laws should have precedence over national laws. I think we answered this one earlier. The state laws should meet or exceed the national laws. So if that is the case, then I would agree, but I'm going to disagree on this one because I think that they would want to go under the national bar. Yeah. Dr. Zaus went and did his thing, and he's already got his results with that whole 216 questions, and here I am 2 hours in on 148 of 216. So we're moving through it. Slowly but surely, we're moving through it. So I'm only in favor of a 100% estate tax when it comes to trolling people who think we need to live in a lay absolute mediocrity. I mean, you do you. So economies without any capitalism will collapse. I'm going to say true. So, like, there are very few countries who could completely run their internal state economy without interacting with the world. I want to say Russia's probably one that's probably going to be close, because they can grow food, they have natural resources, oil, minerals. United States also another country that could probably do it. But I mean, some of the other countries, there's no way that they could do it. China couldn't do it. So I say as a general reason economies would collapse without capitalism. Technology is negatively affected modern society. Disagree. The United Nations should be abolished. Is this one of those things where like, well, I want it to be reformed, so I should agree with it being abolished? Because actually abolishment means X, Y, and Z rather than actual abolishment itself. Those fucking idiots. Like, why not just use the words as they're intended to use it or use a different word? So I think it should be reformed and not abolished. So I'm going to say neutral on this one. The national government protects minorities better than some local governments could do. Maybe. I don't know. Probably if you're looking at welfare programs, yeah, the national government would. But the local governments, local laws and regulations do help out, can help out quite a bit as well. So probably going to go neutral on this one. So we should respect those who served in the military. I agree. The government must maintain a strong military to defend itself. Absolutely agree. It's the best form of deterrent. Alliances can pose a threat to the nation's sovereignty. Yeah, they can, yeah. Because bring up our good old friends there in Istanbul again. Like, they're aligned with the United States, but they could potentially go into Armenia or Greece as well. But they're aligned with the United States. So they can, but for the most part, I don't think they do. But yeah, they can pose a threat to the nation's sovereignty. So getting back to here, So think more workplace discrimination. State and local doesn't have that kind of power. That's true. There's, that's one of the tough things with the question being as vague as it is. Like, there is stuff like the workplace discrimination, some of the national laws that do help for that kind of thing that the state and local government doesn't have power. So that is 100% correct. So whistleblowers should be strongly protected. It depends what they're blowing the whistle about. Like if you blow the whistle and then it ends up causing human lives, like that is not something that you should be strongly protected for. But if you blow the whistle and it's something that the people should know about, I think it should be protected. So it's one of those where, depending on what the scenario is, will affect my opinion. So I'm going to go neutral, unsure on that one. Children should be educated in religious values. Disagree. Like if parents want to, that's fine, but I don't think it should be something done for everyone. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. 100% agree. Nations should cooperate whenever it benefits both of them. Yeah, this is general yes, but at the same time, like if it benefits one and maybe it's neutral on the other, that's also a beneficial relationship. Or you could have one that benefits you on X, and then the next agreement doesn't benefit the other one on Y. So, like two different agreements. So, I'm going to say sure. You should cooperate when it benefits you both. Nations fighting among each other gets in the way of progress. I'm going to disagree. Like it could be something where you can work something out. And fighting amongst each other, so like a war between two nations, the fight may be for progress. So you kind of look at Syria, like they're fighting for progress, not getting in the way of progress, because before with the Ba'ath Party, they weren't progressing towards anything. So nations fighting among each other gets in the way of progress. Disagree. Direct democracy is the best form of government. I disagree. So I think the representative republic, because like there's only a certain amount, kind of a question we had earlier, there's only a certain amount of time that the public has to research some of the issues and all the issues. And then in the digital age with some of the technology, some of the propaganda that's going around, you can see one video and flip your mind. Everybody remembers Coney 2012. That flipped a lot of people's minds very quickly. Then it was found out to be, well, the guy who made it, Coney was a dick in Uganda, but the guy who made it was found out to be kind of a shithead. So I'm going to disagree because I like the representative republic as well. But here's the thing, disagreeing with this too, you're also supporting communism as well. Not just like a representative republic, you're also supporting communism because you're not supporting direct democracy. I enjoy some foreign cultures. Yeah, definitely. I hear in America, especially Western America, we get a predominance of people from Mexico. So, and I enjoy tacos. I enjoy fiestas. I enjoy flan. Like, there's a lot to like about the Mexican culture. So, yeah, some foreign cultures, yeah. From anecdotally speaking, like the Mexican culture, even some of the Asian culture, I like going to some of the Asian markets as well. And then grills like Rodizio or Texas State Brazil, the Brazilian grills, those are fantastic as well. And then going to school, there were a bunch of people from Samoa and Tonga as well. And we had a pig roast. Like, there is a lot to like in some foreign cultures. So I'm going to say I strongly agree there. So the government-owned industry is usually a bad idea. Yeah, it's generally a bad idea because it creates a conflict of interest. If you're going to use the government to implement fairness, how's it going to be fair when the government owns a portion of that industry? Now, as far as like social services and stuff, like humanitarian stuff, I think the government's very good in that aspect. But as far as like it owning like a mineral industry, say the government owned a gold mine, well, that gold mine's not going to be regulated as heavily as some of the other ones that are out there. It is more important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strength. So I read into this as peaceful at all costs, which I disagree with. And I may be reading into this wrong, but yeah, I read it to like, oh well, it's okay that Assad's chemically gassing his own people. We got to try to maintain peaceful relations rather than further our strength in case we had to go into Syria, which we eventually did anyway, which we should have went in earlier as soon as we found out he was chemically bombing his own people. But yeah, so I'm going to disagree because to me it means, well, peace at all cost. And I may be reading into that wrong. So, local governments can understand their citizens better than a national government could. Yeah, that is true. They do. They have more interaction with the citizens there on the ground wall. And like kind of the other questions we've mentioned with this thing is like local governments only have so much power, but this is one of the things that local governments is really good at. We should be taking in more refugees. Yeah, I I think so. I think, especially some of the refugees that came out of Syria, we should have taken some in as well. And like, if we have a chance to take in some refugees from China, from the Uyghur population, I think we should as well. Hong Kong currently taking in some refugees from Hong Kong as well. So yeah, generally I agree. Now there's the drug war in Mexico too, and there are some people who are claiming refugee status from there as well. But generally, refugees short stay period is fine. You know, rather than having them while we're in this war torn country and well, we're going to jump ahead. These people have been trying to immigrate to the United States for a while. But yeah, taking in more refugees is generally a good thing, in my opinion. War usually leads to worse outcomes. So I'm going to disagree. So improperly nation building leads to worse outcomes. And using Libya as an example. So Libya is an example where the French went in, Gaddafi got slaughtered by some of his own people, and then they didn't stay in nation build. Now it's a two-nation state. So it's not the war that leads to the worst outcome. It's the nation building after the war. We must go back to a basic way of life without modern conveniences. Let's all go be Amish. Hey, but at least we can party on Rumspringa. Well, once in our lives. Rumspringa is only once, but yeah, no, let's keep our modern conveniences. Religion must decline for society to progress. Not necessarily. Like I said, there's some good, there's some bad. It just shouldn't be beholden on the society for religion. So, Zouse's comment: are Amish girls allowed to fuck on Rumspringa? Yes, they are. I think generally they don't. So the way Rumspringa works is it's kind of like their journey to like man or womanhood, where they're allowed to go out, do some things that they'll never be able to do again. Like they'll generally like rent a van, go on tourism, go to different sites, view different things, party, drink alcohol, do a bunch of things to just get a taste of the world. But when they come back, they get married and they go full blown Amish for the rest of their life. So, but They can, but I don't think generally they do, if that makes sense. But yeah, Amish people are actually really interesting because they all have like Austrian German accents, which is very strange. Like, you're in the middle part of Iowa, and Iowa has kind of their own little dialect where they say wash instead of wash, and Missouri versus Missouri. And then you meet these people and they speak like they're from Germany. It's interesting to say the least. But they have great butter, they have great candy, and their shops have a bunch of great food, and they do a lot of kind of labor work. Very good craftsmen. Oh, yeah. So if you want to see Amish, Ohio, Iowa, some of those Midwestern, I think there's some in Pennsylvania as well. But definitely Ohio and Iowa have some populations and some communities. Having independent nations with the risk of global conflict creates a large threat to humanity as a whole. So, independent nations with the risk of global conflict creates a large threat to humanity as a whole. I'm not sure what that means. So, like, independent, are they going to be like neutral nations? Are they going to be just do what they want? Like, I don't know what this question means. Just trying to figure it out in my head. I have no idea what it means. So we're going to go unsure. If AI could rule more effectively than humans, then AI should rule. Nah, fuck the robots. We've seen that movie. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. I disagree. Yeah, oppression by governments is a lot worse than by corporations. A lot worse. Immigrants can never really adapt to our way of life. Disagree. Some do, some don't. They're people. There's people who are born and raised here for many generations that don't adapt to our way of life. And we were just talking about the Amish. They're not immigrants. They were immigrants at one point, but they've been here quite a while, and they haven't adapted to our way of life. All right. We're getting there. About 50 more questions. 40, 50, somewhere around there. In order for humanity to survive, we must get past separate nations. Disagree. My religious values should be spread as much as possible. Yeah, so I believe in the religion of the National Football League, and we should spread that as far as possible, far and wide. Because the NFL is God and God is the NFL. Also, hunting and fishing are also a religion, and gardening. So, yeah, we need to spread those aspects to everybody. Everybody that doesn't believe the same way that I do about those things, about the NFL, about hunting, about fishing, about gardening, are pretty much communists. Yeah. So I disagree on this one. Yeah. Because religion should just be about the individual. So yeah, the government versus corporation question it's a tough question, but I just look at oppressive governments around the world and say, well, China, for example, like, would you want to be a Uyghur right now? Or somebody in Hong Kong? Like, yeah, there are some corporations that suppress people, but also, like, if you're in the United States, you can choose to go work for someone else. Unless you were in West Virginia under the Don Blankenship years where you couldn't work for anybody else because they submitted your name to every other coal mine in the area, so they wouldn't hire you. But for the most part, you can go work and go live somewhere else versus, like, if you're in China right now and where the Uyghurs are at, you can't go anywhere else. You're stuck. You either worship Ping, Xi or you go to an internment camp. That's way more oppressive. So every militia, every religion must be looked at equally by the government. I'll agree. If we accept migrants at all, it is important that they assimilate to our culture. Disagree. They can do whatever they want as long as they don't harm anybody. Jeez, makes me sound like a libertarian. So, popular opinion is not always right. Strongly agree. Only those who served in the military should be able to gain power in the government. Disagree. One of the great things about America is you could be sitting here in your living room right now, decide to run for a politician, and eventually decide to be president, and you can. If you win that popularity contest, you can. You don't have to serve in the military. Laws should be completely consistent within all regions of the nation. I guess it depends on what laws, and who's stating the laws. But I'm going to take this as national laws should be completely consistent within all regions of the nation. And I believe so. If it's not, then there's a problem in enforcement. And if it's a law that's unenforceable, we should get it off the books because it's not enforceable. So, I agree. We should be more accepting of other cultures. That's up to you as the individual. Like, oh, well, we should accept you for this. It's like, you know what? If I don't like you, I don't like you. As long as I don't harm you, that's fine. It is important that we further my group's goals above all others. Yeah, because I'm a self-important asshole, or my group's a bunch of self-important, self-righteous fuckheads. Yeah, it's not that important. Only those who serve in the military should be allowed to have influence of who is in power. Disagree. This actually reminds me, if anybody in the chat seen Starship Troopers, where you can only vote if you served in the military. This is a fascist question. But yeah, so like in Starship Troopers, the difference between a citizen and a civilian. Oh, but I'm going to disagree because I don't like fascism. My nation should stay out of international affairs. Strongly disagree. Yep. Service guarantees citizenship. I think I was on either Kevin or Henry's stream one night the day I figured out that Starship Troopers was actually a fascist movie. Because I always thought it was a good movie, the whole quote, "Are we going to live forever? Or do you want to live forever?" Fantastic. Fantastic movie about killing bugs. But until I think I watched a YouTube video or something or read an article where somebody's like, this is actually a fascist movie. I'm like, what? It's about killing alien bugs. It's a lot of fun. Like, no, look at the uniforms. Look at this. I'm like, oh, fuck. Fell for that. One of the reasons why public opinion can often be wrong. Even though it's still a great movie, it still has, based on a book that's kind of has more fascist tendencies. And they tried to make a movie to show over the top how bad fascism is by using fascism against something everybody hates, like insects. Yeah, interesting dynamic, but yeah, I was disappointed the day I learned that. Most bad things happening in the world are caused by us turning away from religion. Strongly agree. Or disagree. Countries fall apart with constant war. Well, I mean, you look at Afghanistan. Well, yeah, but it's been at war for 50 years. First, it was internal, then it was the Soviets, then it was internal, and then now the United States is there. And the United States is trying to piece it back together. The first country is trying to piece it back together. So, yeah, if you're in a constant war, of course, but I think this is getting more about endless wars. Like, generally, the war is the easy part. It's the nation building after the war that's the hard part. So, like, constant state of war. The really Afghanistan's more of kind of like a militia conflict, but you look at the Iraq War, it ended in 2011. Is when the Iraq War ended. 8 years after we went there, but we're still there. We're still nation building. So I'm going to strongly disagree because normally it's just a necessary step to start the rebuild process. Testing products on animals is ethical. 100%. It's one of the ways we can develop drugs and pharmaceuticals versus like just experimenting them on people. And a bunch of the test animals are grown specifically for that. They won't know any other life other than testing. So it is 100% ethical. I know that's probably controversial to say, but how else would you do it? Depending on what aspect of life. We grow insulin from E. coli, which is a bacteria that naturally occurs in our gut. We modify the E. coli to grow the insulin. Now, bacteria, you can consider it an organism, you can consider it an animal. We do the testing for the benefit of society versus what we were doing before with pigs, where half the time it would be rejected by the host. So, yeah, but product testing on animals is ethical. It's better than testing it on humans. Military options should always be considered. Strongly agree. But really, the option you should consider is going to be the most effective option. Whether it's diplomacy, whether it's sanctions, whether it's military. But generally, the military option should always be considered. Countries that violate human rights should be toppled. Hey, absolutely. But, the United States, there's a limited amount that the United States can do because we don't really have too much help from the rest of our allies. Our second biggest military ally is Turkey, and Turkey is kind of an asshole. So after that, it's probably Germany, Poland, or Great Britain, or France. So it's not looking good on that front. It's either the United States does it or the people exist under a dictatorship. That's brutal. A country cannot function without a national government. Yeah. You need somebody to lead. The national government needs more power. So I assume this means the United States, and the United States government needs more power. In which case I would disagree. So I think the United States government is already powerful enough. The problem is they can't convince each other on the side of the aisle in the House or the Senate because we've become such polarized parties in the country. So giving that more power for more lame duckery. That's a new word. Lame duckery. Should trademark that. But yeah, you just give more power to sit there in a stalemate. Yeah. It's like adding more time to the chess clock when it's king on king and you're only going to end a stalemate. So the government should have access to emails suspected terrorists. Yeah. They can do that under subpoena. Yeah. We should not allow any refugees. Disagree. The more people ask, the better chance there is of reaching the best decision. That one, yeah. depends on who you're asking, what party you're asking, and what the topic is. Because generally, more information is good, but you could just end up searching for the decision you agree with. So I just think the question's too vague. So Zhao says he had to do work on an animal testing lab. He had to put on a full spacesuit and go through a damn airlock to get into the clean area. Yeah. You probably got to be sprayed with a bleach and water solution too to decon yourself too before going into the clean area as well. Yeah, they don't want that stuff to get out. As we've kind of seen with the COVID, because a lot of people think it came from a lab where obviously the right procedures and stuff to keep it in the lab were not followed and it escaped. So the existence of the state is a threat to our liberty. Yeah, no, it's not. Foreigners should never enter the country. Disagree. Especially like tourism. Like, yeah, bring anybody over here who wants to go to Yellowstone, wants to go to Arches, wants to go to these different monuments, these different areas, want to go see New York City, Giant Bean in Chicago, the Bubblegum Wall in Seattle. So, disagree. There should be a compulsory military service. I think so. I think it would be a benefit to everyone to do 2 years or even just a year of military service. So yeah, I actually strongly agree about that one. I think the United States would be, like people in the United States would be better for it, just going through and being able to learn the discipline, the other aspects that are taught in the military. Even if they just go to boot camp, they're never deployed, just doing that training. So yeah, I think there should be. Communism, if implemented correctly, would be a good form of economics. What does it mean by implemented correctly? Because there are some advantages to communes. Like if you had rather than a park in the middle of your town, if you had just a bunch of like apple trees, for instance, or you just had everybody go there and you can just grow whatever you want, this area that's publicly shared, we're actually growing food, that is a benefit to society. But it's more of a social service than it would be a form of economics. So economics where the community produces all the goods, but they're not selling it outside of the community, is an absolutely bad form of economics. So like I said, there are some benefits to like communes or other parts of doctrine from like communism, but I think they're more social services rather than economic. The internet should be banned. No, we're not China. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. Well, you defeat the purpose of your protest. So, like, studies have shown, like, if you're protesting and then the government comes in and be violent with you, you generate more public support and opinion. Now, but if you're a protest and you turn violent, you lose support for the thing that you're protesting. So, yeah, I would say definitely I disagree. Like, don't exhort to violence because then anybody can define their government as authoritarian and then result to violence. Religion should be banned. No, people should be able to practice whatever they want. Military spending is a waste of money. Disagree. Representatives rarely represent the nation well. Now, assume this is meaning the House of Representatives rather than the Senate. So if it's the House of Representatives, they are representing their district. Their district means more than the nation because that's the goal of the House. Now, the Senate's representing the state rather than the House. So they're trying to do what is best for their state, not necessarily what's best for their country. So I'm going to say, depending on where you live, they probably don't represent the nation very well. Catering to popular opinion is a detrimental to the nation. Yeah, but that's how you get elected. You have to be more popular than the candidate you're running against to get elected. So yeah, it can be detrimental to the nation, but that's how you get elected. That's part of the game. So I disagree. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism. Yeah. I don't like it, but it's the way it is. I hate going to the airport because apparently I have one of those faces that makes me look like a terrorist because I get searched almost every time. In fact, the only time I didn't get searched is when I went up to Canada in the last 5 years. I guess I look Canadian or something. But yeah, it's just necessary. It sucks. I hate TSA, but they have a job to do, and they help protect us. So, some freedom must be given up to keep people safe. Yeah. Basic things are needed to leave, such as healthcare, are rights. So, healthcare, I think what it's saying, that question's weird, and the punctuation is absolutely weird too. Like the excessive use of commas makes me think that this person's a communist who made this test. Basic things are needed to live, such as healthcare, are rights. So I would agree with basic things needed to live. Now, as far as healthcare support, universal healthcare, but not necessarily the Bernie Sanders healthcare is a human right. I believe it's a service. Healthcare is a service that I think the government can subsidize through a public option. So healthcare is not a right. So I'm going to have to go neutral because I believe basic things needed to live, yes, but I don't think healthcare is one of those basic things because it's not a right. But just a weirdly worded question and weird use of commas. Police should be more regulated. Sure. I think they still just need more training. As far as regulations, you could regulate the amount of training that they can do. I know this question is probably to prevent shootings and kind of that thing. But yeah, I think, it's part of the regulations that they should have certain hours of training. I believe too that they should have a certain level of physical fitness to be in the police force. The donut munchers, Paul Blart Mall Cop police officers need to be in shape. They need to have a wellness program. They need to do things so they can perform the job at the best of their ability. And I think those things could come in form of regulations. But like I said, this question's probably more like, let's regulate and prevent from shooting stuff. But I'm going to slightly agree. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. Yeah, taxes are interesting. So I hate the fact that there are deductions. So the game isn't fair for everybody. So you can make a certain amount of money and you can deduct. Why not just set a tax rate that's the tax rate? No matter who you are, you're going to pay that. And I know married people normally chime in when I say that because they get a huge discount because they have kids. Because kids cost more. Well, it's like you made that decision. I didn't make that decision. I'm getting penalized for not making that decision. So taxes, we should just have a tax rate that's everybody can pay. There's no deductions. This is your tax rate for the amount of your income. period. So, like, and that would probably increase taxes on the rich because they wouldn't be able to deduct a bunch of it away. But then the tax rates would have to be a little bit lower so you're not adversely affecting the economy. So, getting rid of deductions and lowering the tax but still collecting more money would be something I would be in favor for. And providing more services to the poor, well, something needs to be done, because there are people who are abusing the system and those need to be taken care of. But also the people that live in the systemic poverty also need more resources as well. But it's not like, the city of Chicago, south side of Chicago has been the problem for many years. And what does the city often do? They invest things to bring tourists to Chicago. They kind of leave this community and they invest in other communities to bring tourists in rather than dealing with the problems that they have. So it would be about improving the ways they address the poor and the systemic poverty in those regions as well. But it's probably more of an idealist because I'm not on their city council. I don't know what their budget. I don't know what they have to do. But generally speaking, like increasing the amount of money that the federal government is making, especially with the way the government's in debt, would be good. But I'd also be in favor of getting rid of all deductions as well and just having tax rates that actually work, that people don't make the same amount but they're taxed different amounts of money. Strong states weaken the nation? No. California is a massive economy in the world, and it strengthens our nation. As much as people shit on California, and I tend to do that myself on occasion, but having California as such a strong state strengthens the United States of America. Having Texas, such a strong state, strengthens the United States of America. What weakens the nation are states like Kansas, which are a dumpster fire. West Virginia, which is also a dumpster fire. Okay? That's what weakens the nation, are the weak states. Vermont doesn't do anything for the nation. Like, it is like 49th in the nation in the economy. Like, it doesn't do anything. It's just a sap. It's just a beautiful place and just leeches off everybody else. So, like, I'd say the weaker states weaken the nation. The stronger states help some of the other states hold their own footing. Those who do not work should die. Has anybody in the history ever hit agree or strongly agree on this question? Yeah, I don't know how you can. The way this question's worded, there's nobody in the world that's going to agree. Religion normally provides the truth. Disagree. A nation culture is important to protect. I think the American one is. There are other nations. Yeah, there are other nations where I would say the culture is not important to protect, but American, like the liberalism in America and the fact that you can say, you know what, fuck you to a representative or fuck you to a government, like that is an important culture to protect. So now he says the last question refers to the size of government. Yeah. So I will agree in the American sense that it's important to protect. Religious clothing should be banned from public. No, you can wear whatever you want. I mean, some people wear Green Bay Packers gear walking up and down the street. That shouldn't be banned. It should be worn, and people can point out how idiotic it is to be a cheesehead. Like, so yeah, I strongly disagree. Society was better many years ago than it is now. Yeah, I disagree. I think with the modern technology, society is a lot better now than what it was before. States cannot function without a strong national government. Absolutely true. There may be California, maybe Texas, but other than that, they're not going to function. Like, I'll use New York for an example. New York has a great hub, New York City. But as far as food, New York, they wouldn't be able to feed their population. Texas may struggle with that as well, but New York also doesn't have a lot of natural resources, such as oil and other those things, so they would struggle without the federal government. So yeah, states would definitely not function great, other than maybe, Alaska is another one that could probably. Yeah, there are farms in upstate New York, but can you feed the entire population of New York City with those farms? I don't think so. Like, you can grow stuff in New York, but they're not going to be able to feed the city with their rural population. Nations should not maintain a military. Strongly disagree. All right. We completed it. Took 2 hours and 40 minutes to complete. So, the results. So, I am neutral on federal and unitary. So, federal and the state, a little bit more towards state rights. Neutral on democracy versus authority, with a little bit more authoritarian in me. So, neutral on globalism. So, with a little bit more in isolationism. Militariness, 78% militant, and 22% pacifist. So, security and freedom, I'm also neutral, with 56% going towards security and 44% going towards freedom. Equality in markets, neutral again, with a little bit more going towards markets. So, versus religion and secularism, I'm a moderate secular, with about 66% going there. Fuck. Well, so I'm a moderate progressive. I hate the word progressive. Damn it. That's the one I wanted to avoid at all of these, but traditionalist, I mean, if it's going up against there, yeah, of course, I'm going to be progressive rather than traditionalist. But yeah. And then assimilationist versus multiculturalist, neutral with a little bit more multiculturalist. So pretty much just a radical centrist, I guess, who's a moderate secular and a moderate fucking progressive. But, just going through the test, going a little bit. A lot of questions, and a lot of questions I think were very ambiguous, where you had to draw more context in the question than what was provided in the question. So, like, you had to say, well, if I view it from this kind of light, my answer is going to go this way. If I view it from this kind of light, my answer is going to go this way. And there were some questions that were very poorly worded as well. So, but overall, I think, with the centrists write up, the based enlightened centrism, it's kind of where I was thinking, other than the progressive thing. Because I hate being in a basket with those jackasses. So, but that's really all I wanted to go through in this stream. So, about 2 hours and 45 minutes. So, this is the 9-axis test, and you can take it. I know Dr. Zaus said it earlier. And just to kind of compare his results with mine. So, same. He's a little bit more democratic, a lot more globalist. I'm a lot more militarist. He's a little bit more, or a lot more equitable, a lot more secular. Yeah, Dr. Zaus is more progressive than I am. I can take that to light. And then 66, yeah, he's a little bit more multiculturalist than I am. So I know Richard also did his, and I think he's posting it on Twitter as well. So, but thank you guys for joining me and going through this test. It's very interesting. Some of these tests, I just take them just to see what the results are. So, but if you want to take it, it's at 9axis, or you're probably going to Google it because that website's a bunch of garble to put in. But yeah, just Google 9axis. And so, yeah, Zal says I went strongly on a lot of the ones where he went mild. So, yeah, there's probably some of that, whether you answer it just barely agree or strongly as well, you know. But yeah, 216 questions down. So thank you guys for joining me, and you guys have a wonderful night.